Matt Anderson, Volcano. Today's topic comes from ideas that have been most recently put in my head by a book called Hardwiring Happiness, which is by Rick Hanson. And there are three things I want to share. First one, it may be a reminder, I think it's an amazingly powerful reminder that our brain has a legacy of fear. In other words, the brains that we have in our heads have evolved, it's good to know, I suppose, over 200,000 years. And certainly one of the best ways the brain was explained to me was in a book I read earlier this year by Daniel Levitin called The Organized Mind, that our brain is anything but this sort of clean computer that has no data in it, but on the contrary, comes as this computer that's pre-installed like it's an old house, where it constantly needs to be played with and bits need to be changed and improved. But this legacy of fear comes from one, if you think about, I mean, it hasn't been that many generations ago that for most human beings, life was about surviving, and that's all it was about. And that and that you made the wrong decision, and you were dead, whether it was a wild animal or whether it was somebody that had a lot more power than you. So that's where our brain is today, and I think and it's also attracted and hardwired. We tend to remember the negative also a lot more. So I mean, just some quick examples on how that works in real life. Think about the celebrity that you admire, and then they get pulled over for drunk driving, or they cheat on their spouse, and that's how you label that person for the rest of their life, even though they've done many really impressive things for what they're good at. Politicians go into that realm as well. I mean, where we expect people that are in the public eye to be perfect. But my point is what we tend to remember them isn't all the work they do for charity and their great performances that they've had in whatever they're good at. We tend to remember them for the one, that one time they proved that they were a flawed human being. And I'm not defending that. I'm simply saying that that's what our brain is attracted to. In the same way in politics, that negative political campaign ads are so popular for that very reason, that they stick in our head more, because that's what our brain's hardwired for. And in the same way that with the media, that adage you've probably heard, if it bleeds, it leads, that's still what we see on our televisions today or in the newspapers when we're looking at what's going on in the news. So my point is it helps, I think, to understand that you're battling something that's been pre-installed into your head that is generally hardwired for the negative. They even say within relationships, so when one fairly negative thing happens, you need at least 5 positive things, not one, but 5 positive things to counteract that one negative thing. And then the last thing that I want to make point-wise as far as this goes is that what we also have a bad habit of doing is underlearning from good things that happen and overlearning from bad things. And I see this in business and sales all the time, that people are burned by a bad experience, and it leaves too much of a scar and detracts from the 8 things out of 10 that they do right on any given day. And I think we're all wired to make that mistake. So that's one point that I wanted to make, just a big kind of where we're coming from on this topic. And then the second thing I want to say is, and this metaphor is used in the Rick Hanson book, is that see the brain as a garden, and that there are 3 choices you have with your brain. One of them is to do nothing with your garden, to be perfect, to accept it as it is and leave it. And that's great if you're happy with the where it is at the moment. Option 2 is to start pulling weeds, to start noticing unhelpful beliefs, negative thoughts. Catching them is definitely a positive step to living a happier life. And then the third and best thing you can do is to plant flowers in your brain. And this is my third point. And really, this is the entire point to the book Hardwiring Happiness, is what we all need to do is notice the small good things that happen on an everyday basis. And it could be just putting on a favorite piece of clothing, or drinking that delicious cup of coffee that we enjoy so much. I mean, it just and again, some of this starts to sound tacky, you know, like noticing that the sun's coming up, but those small positive things, or just something fun, you know, interaction-wise that you have with one of your children. It doesn't have to be, or the hug you get from your spouse when you come home, but not just doing that. But what he says is you need to enrich it, think, you know, dwell on it for a bit longer than just the moment it happens, and then absorb it, let it sink in. And if you can just do that take a 1 second positive experience and turn it into a 10-second positive experience, it's going to, if it can become a habit, which is a big statement, can slowly start to hardwire the brain for happiness. And I just think that's a really empowering thing to know. And my other takeaway on that point then is to write it down. And that's one thing I've started to do is you know, what were the top 3 positive experiences in the day, and absorb them more, let them sink in. And so again, I have to mention, for those of you that are Volcano members, that there are, well, firstly there's a journal or a diary that comes, and so what I'm using, I really am, is there's a notes page, and so I'm using the notes to pay attention to this. And then the other thing I'm doing is there's some great questions at the back, many of them from a book called The Way of the Seal by Mark Divine. But some of these questions I'm finding enormously helpful to helping me focus, including these evening ones. You know, what were the top 3 positive things that happened today and why? And really letting that embed. And according to Rick Hansen, that's the type of thing that's going to hardwire happiness. So good luck with that.